Thank you for joining us tonight. If you have joined us, if you're joining us just now online, we'll get started in just a moment. All right, looks like we don't have anyone else joining us on Zoom, so we'll begin with our land acknowledgement. Director Jackson, am I passing that off to you?
Thank you. We acknowledge that South Whidbey School District is in the ancestral and current territory of the Snohomish people. The Snohomish people, ancestors, present generations, and future generations have deep spiritual ties to this land. Additional Coast Salish tribes, including the Snohomish, Swinomish, Stillaguamish, and Suquamish, have deep ties to this land. The tribes collectively affiliated with the Tulalip tribes have deep ties to this land. And being in colonized territory, I personally want to take responsibility for knowing about these relations, about the history and present relations between Indigenous people and land, and recognize how settler colonialism strives to sever people from land, sever people from one another, sever people from their history and their language, from their culture, from their plant and animal relations. And as part of this land acknowledgement, I personally assume responsibility for healing the severed relations in my own lineage and in the place that I currently call home on this island, once known as Chakolchi, now known as Whidbey Island, and this territory, which is currently shared through the Treaty of Point Elliott, signed by 82 tribes in Mukilteo on January 22nd, 1855. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm trying not to share a nasty cold with my fellow board members and those here in present, so I will try to enunciate carefully. I apologize if the mask makes it difficult to hear or understand. This is a workshop, so this is one of those opportunities where we will be engaging with the community in back and forth discussion on the topics on the agenda. We've got 3 topics on the agenda. I'm looking forward to hearing what folks have to say about all 3 of them. Hopefully, if you aren't able to attend in person, you're able to watch this later on because there'll be some great information here. If you are on Zoom, there aren't many folks here on at the moment, but if you are on Zoom and have a comment you'd like to make, please use the Q&A function to list your name and location, just to let us know that you have a comment or question, and then we will, and then start typing it up and I'll read it in as soon as you've typed it up, but that'll let us know that you have something you want to say. Please keep in mind our policy 0002, which is our professional communication policy, which dictates and provides support for us in how we discuss things with the community and how the community discusses things with us and how we discuss with each other. So please keep that in mind when making comments. We'll move on straight away to our first point of the evening, which is our data summit and school improvement plans update. I'll pass it off to Dr. Moshe first.
Thank you. So I'm really happy to introduce our principals who are going to present tonight and talk with you about our data summit. It's a mid-year summit of where we are on the district's goals. So next slide, we have, of course, our vision and mission that guides everything we do, looking to make sure that our students are lifelong learners who are multiculturally engaged, literate, and active in their community so that they can be resilient, innovative, compassionate, and productive when they graduate into the world. And along those lines, the board sets goals for the superintendent every year, which then in turn guide the principals and then the rest of the district. So we'll take a look at our goals. We're specifically going to look at goals number 1 and 2. The slides are a little slower than I am, it seems. So the first 2 goals, social emotional learning, building a culture of care and belonging by engaging staff and students in evolving and participating in an inclusive educational community to which they are proud to be a part. And of course, continuing best practices that nurture and create innovative learning environments.
Dr. Moshe, if I can just interrupt briefly, Lori from Langley is asking if we'll be able to see the slides. So it seems that they aren't able to see them on the stream. I'm seeing it on my version. So Lori, please keep us informed if you can see the slides.
Yeah, we can see them on our Zoom.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, you may want to try going out and coming back into the,
What, and while we're in an interruption, may I just mention there's a missing word on the second goal, but it should end in the word choose.
Yes.
yes, it should. Thank you. And of course, logistics, which we will be presenting on logistics in the near future because we've been working diligently on our bond and implementing our bond. But tonight is really all about goals 1 and 2. And without further ado, I'm going to start off with Mr. Patton and the work he's been doing, and then we'll go to middle level and then finish with elementary. And as the board knows, this is really a participatory event. So hopefully if folks have questions, we can get some flow going here. But if there are questions, please stop us and we will try and answer them the best we can. So John?
Thank you. First, I want to start off is, I'm here tonight to share some data based around our 2 goals. And again, I think it's important to note that at the high school and all the building levels, we take those same goals that Dr. Mocha gets from the school board, and we use them as our school improvement plan, our goals, and also that's also true with our teachers. Our teachers also have socio-emotional goals for their evaluation and also academic goals. So I think that reigns true K-12. So just a reminder. So the first goal, I don't need to read it to you because we're all real familiar with it as a socio-emotional. And again, the questions we have at the high school is what will you implement in order to have an impact towards achieving this goal? And that will be, that'll come out in the data. I'll talk about that. Improve the I-they gap on the CE survey willingness to be held accountable by 10% at the high school, from 28% to 18%. My math was incorrect. The third is maintain and work to improve the student response. Is there an adult I can go to on the student wellness survey?
And while we're in a pause, just a moment, I wanted to address the I-they gap for those who weren't in the CE survey. That's the difference between I am willing to be held accountable versus my fellow staff members are willing to be held accountable. So just to address that for those who were not in on that presentation.
Thank you. So the first thing I want to talk about is the student wellness survey. And so far we've took it last spring, 2023, this fall, and recently here in January and winter 2024. The first question is, in the past week, how often have you felt supported? So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different categories that the students could choose. I kind of lumped them together. The almost never, once in a while, 30.6%, dropped to 23.8%, and then dropped even more in the winter to 22%. So I thought that was encouraging. Sometimes 34% spring, 23.4% in the fall, and winter 30.5%. And frequently and always 42.9%, 66.3% in the fall, and currently 56.3%. So again, we're seeing some improvements in some areas. And this is one of the 3 questions that we really focus on as a staff. So working with staff, we went over all the data and disaggregated it, talked about it. So there were some interesting things, and I want to share it with you. So there was 3 other questions. I have a friend or a staff member or an outside adult that I can count on. So friend, which is real high throughout last spring, 92.9, fall 88.9. Maybe that's some new students and freshmen. and currently 94.8%. And that is encouraging. Staff member, again, didn't hit that 85% mark, 79%, 83.3%, and 78.4%. Outside adults, this was real encouraging. 94.1%, 95.6%, and 95.8%. So in talking with our staff about this data, trying to get to that 85% with our staff, we go through, we know it's not an anonymous survey, so we can go through and see which students didn't choose a staff member that they could go to. And we would reach out, whether it's an advisory teacher, a coach, a secretary, et cetera. But also we had an aha in talking to some of our students who didn't pick a staff, and some of the anecdotal answers from some of the students were things like, I don't need to go to a staff member. I have guardians at home that I feel real well supported. And that was an aha moment for our staff, because it's like, we want to be all and everything for our students, but you know what? We have great parents, we have great guardians, we have people outside looking after our students. So I thought that was kind of an aha moment.
Mr. Patton?
Yes.
Is there I'm not really sure how to do the arithmetic here. How can we figure out what percentage of students have anybody they can count on, whether it's any number of those categories? In other words, what percentage of students don't have anybody they can count on?
Yep, and that's what I'm going to talk about here with the takeaways. So out of all the students that were in the winter survey, only 5.1% said yes to one of those three categories. So we had 0 students who said they didn't have one from each category. So that was encouraging. And again, so the 5.1% we reached out to already. There was a couple students that said, actually, I have all three. I was just having a bad day and I'm sick and tired of taking surveys. Just to be honest. And, the student was great. And so there was no worries or concerns. The 20.1% said yes to 2 out of the 3 categories. And again, what's real encouraging is 75.5% said yes to 3 out of 3 of the categories. So again, as long as there's, I think it's great to have a friend to go to, but the adult piece is, I think, paramount. Another thing too is we have a wonderful student support team, again, from Island County, our career counselors at the high school, and our ESD counselors. And in the spring, we asked our students, do they know who they are? And only 49.6% said yes. And that was discouraging, because we want all of our students to know that they have access to the student support team. In the fall, it rose to 59.9%. And in the winter, it rose to 64.3%. Still, we would like to be 100%. But what we did is we had our student support team go to each advisory and talk about who they are and what they do, and familiar face. So it's encouraging.
I also wonder if this might be one of those situations where they know who their counselor is, but they don't know what a student support specialist is.
Correct. Also, again, socially emotional, we also look at discipline and the equity in our discipline. So this year, so far, again, just semester 1 numbers, we had 14 exclusions. In the state of Washington, they recognize an exclusion as anytime a student is out of class, removed from class. So it also includes in-school suspensions, short-term suspensions, long-term suspensions, and expulsions. Also, the state of Washington also considers if you remove a student from class to the hallway, that could be an exclusion, but that is not a practice we have done at South Whidbey High School for many years. We don't believe in that. We don't do that. Of our 14 exclusions, there were 12 total students, which means 2 students were had an exclusion twice. 11 were male, 1 were female, 10 were white students, and 2 I put other. So again, if you look at our data, this in the equity lens, we have a 20%, about an 80% of our students are white. So over 80% of our students were excluded. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I just wanted to show you that there wasn't any disparaging numbers with marginalized groups.
So judging by the data around who was excluded, there's a skew towards male students being excluded. So there's a gender, the discipline rates are skewed according to gender, but on the lines of race, they fall along the same lines as the demographics in our district.
Yes, and I can even go further, and I could say that the white males are the predominantly freshmen. So is also
Population.
age.
Thank you.
Yep. Academic growth, what will you implement in order to have an impact towards achieving this goal? And again, you got this information in the fall and the SMARTY goals and presentations. Identify successful programs, student outcomes, enrollment, health and safety, et cetera. So I did a semester 1 GPA breakdown. Our overall average GPA for all students is a 3.05. Male, a little below that with a 2.98. Female, 3.28, and other gender is it's a below an N. It's below N, so I'm not going to 10. It's N is below 10, so I'm not going to share that information publicly. Ethnicity and race, same thing. We have African American, Black. We have less than 10, so I'm not sharing that data. Asian, also less than 10. Hispanic Latino was a 3.20, which is above the overall average. We have 20 of those students. 2 or more races, a 3.04, almost just about at the average, 25 students. Native American is below, 2.80. We have 14 students in that category. And white, 3.15 with 293 students. So there is some, as far as ethnicity, there is some differences. And so again, that's something we need to look at and talk about as staff and how we can support those students.
Just looking at the statistics there, I would also encourage you to look at the African American, Black, and Asian, because looking at these, it suggests something else is bringing down that average, which isn't being shown here. So it suggests that it is within those categories. So that's definitely something I would look at too, with privately available data.
Yes, and that's something I believe I can share with the board, but not publicly.
So I can explain a little bit about that. So you were asking, how do I see that? So if our overall average is 3.05, and the average of the majority of our students, our white students, is 3.15, then the average of our non-white students is significantly below that, since they're a smaller population, in order to pull that overall average down.
So I'll just say that it's not
Significantly below.
significantly.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I can share that with you after the meeting too.
Well,
And-
I don't need to know those numbers. I trust that y'all know it and,
Yep, we
and
do.
we'll address it. I just want to, looking at that mathematically.
Right.
Yeah.
Something I appreciate about this process in a district our size is that our staff work to protect the anonymity of students
Absolutely.
in this process. And so I appreciate that you have data drilled down to a much more finite level than it would be appropriate for the public to see. And I appreciate your discretion in what you share and how you share it.
Thank you.
Agreeing with that. I don't need to see that data. I trust that y'all have it and are acting on it.
Attendance, obviously, it supports social, emotional, and academic. I wanted to share our attendance. Semester 1 of this year, we're at 89.16 daily attendance. We would like to get up to, we've been up pre-COVID up to 93, 94%, which we'd like to be. 4.57% unexcused. That's not far off, and that's not bad comparatively. Where we kind of get dinged is excused, 6.26. And you got to remember, every time a team leaves early, they're considered absent but excused. And that number, especially in the spring, may go up. You got to remember about 60% of our students are involved with sports, and probably half of our school in the spring are involved with spring sports. So they leave earlier. So if you look at, and again, this is semester 1, comparing it to a whole school year last year, we're above and our trend is good. But, maybe students like to skip school more in the spring. Maybe we are going to have more excused absences in the spring. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out for the whole year.
Another thing for the public is that also includes doctor's appointments and other vacations. So I know that particularly folks looking at the OSPI, Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction website, looking at students enrolled every day, it's like, yeah, my daughter's on that list because she had a cold yesterday and I didn't want to share it. That's an absence, but
I'll just
yeah, not
I'll
all
just commentary
absences.
and say that I don't really appreciate the way the OSPI shares the attendance data. It's misleading.
100% agreed.
I wanted to share with you our SAT and PSAT scores, and the highest score you can get is 1600. So I just wanted to share with you our, high school, we're at 1154, the state is 982, and globally, which means the whole country, the whole world, 933. So we're well above, and that's where we should be. And there was obviously improvement from last year. And last year we had a great senior group, and this year kind of eclipsed that. So that was good to see. Fall SAT scores also, 1124, and we did have one student score a 1560, which is about the best I've heard since I've been here. So that was pretty neat. State 1036 and global 940. So that's just, I think it's good to compare state and the country and the rest of the world, how we do. AP class demographics, this is something we look at.
Can I
go
just
ahead,
ask
sorry.
real quick on the previous slide? Is the SAT used internationally, or is that really, and would you say
Yeah.
that it's testing on skills that are sort of universally adopted in school districts across the globe?
I think so. Yes, I would say yes. The other thing too is the trend is during COVID, a lot of the colleges and universities in our country stopped using SAT scores as application entry. That's changing. That's coming back now.
Yes.
So it's interesting. We got to share that with our students that you should take it regardless of what school does take it or not take it, because we want to make sure that they have that.
Yeah, I appreciate that note. I did hear an NPR story about how some colleges are moving back towards asking for SAT scores because they've seen in the data that students from historically marginalized identities would have very likely been accepted based on the merits of their test scores had that information been provided.
Something we look at too as a staff and myself, and it really is, there's checks and balances with the OSPI that we have to share a plan of how we are going to improve certain things. And one of it is, IB, which we don't have, and also AP classes. And what is the breakdown and what is the access for all students? And so we look at this semester, we had 91 students total taking an AP class. And some of those students are taking two also at the same time. So it's not 91 head count, it's 91 FTE or whatever you want to call it. 41 male, 50 female. 1 African American, 2 Asian, 5 Hispanic Latino, 2 or more races, and 0 Native American. If you add all those first categories and you exclude white, basically we have only 16% of our marginalized population are taking AP classes, and that's not good enough because they're at a 20% population rate in our school. So that's something we're falling short with. And so we've done things. We started this really last year is talking to individual students. Hey, you would be great in this class, and just trying to get more students in those subcategories to actually take classes. So that's something we look at. So again, I've given you some data, and at the high school, a little differently, we don't have iReady, we don't have interims, and a lot of other data, but really in the spring, we get hit hard with assessments and measurements. I mean, it seems like we test for 2 months straight. So some things that are coming up is our SAT in the March, CEE survey again in late March, AP testing in April, healthy use survey results. We took the healthy use, I wanted to share the results. We took it in the fall, but we don't get it until the spring. So I couldn't share that information with you. SBAC and science state tests, we do that in April, and we get the test results almost immediately. And again, we will take the same wellness survey for the students in May. OSPI does something also on on the report card. It's called Ninth Grade on Track. And basically what that is last year, for the school year, it was 81.9%. So basically how they calculate that is how many freshmen did not fail a class, and that's how they factor it. So, again, I have the data for first semester with freshmen, how many classes failed, but there's also a trend where freshmen fail more classes first semester than they do total of second semester because they've kind of adapted, they've got interventions and helped. So I don't want to share that first semester information until the end of the year. And graduation rate, of course, something we always look at, and that's obviously not going to be till June. So that's pretty much all the data that I'm sharing. Any questions?
I want to just mention that if there's curiosity about accessing outside counsel on the question of how to increase the attractiveness of our AP programming to students of color and other students with marginalized backgrounds, I just know of some nonprofits doing good work in that area. And I think there are some great resources out there. So I'd be happy to partner with the superintendent or others on thinking through some resources.
And what's encouraging too is we're also, not only that, we're also throwing it out there in pre-registration to see if our students are interested in AP pre-calculus, something we haven't offered for a while. And that might be another opportunity for more students, again, to take an AP class.
I do want to open this up specifically to our student representatives and to our community members in the room. If they have any comments or questions, please let us know. Feel free to raise your, if you don't have a mic, feel free to raise your hand. If you do have a mic, feel free to speak up. We do want to hear from everybody.
On the AP pre-calc, we got that question asked in our AP stats test, and there seemed like a lot of people that were wanting to take it and a lot of people wondering where it would fit in. So hopefully people will be able to fit it into the schedule, because I know a lot of people have been wanting more APs for students to take over the year. Our AP curriculum, we have some really good classes as is. I've been able to take the AP Biology and AP US History classes so far. Both of those I've enjoyed so much. And with the AP Biology class, they switched it from a semester curriculum to a year curriculum, which I know has really helped the students to make the class itself feel less rushed and let the students really grow with the curriculum instead of just having a semester of basically college level course as a sophomore, which is really enjoyable and nice to see.
I don't really have much to say.
Mr. Brown, I have a question. Well, a compliment and a question. First of all, I really appreciate all the data you showed and the breakdowns and just your humility to acknowledge that there are areas for improvement and plans to work with your team on those. Since this is a data summit, my data related question is, which metric, either that you presented or otherwise, is either the most concerning or the one that you want to focus on improving?
Well, I think at first I go back to AP by ethnicity. I think that's a place that we're falling. I mean, you look at, we have Native American students and we have 0. I think that's the first thing that jumps out at me. I think also our freshmen are always challenging. So there's always a lot of work behind interventions academically for them to realize how to be a high school student. And usually they turn the corner. And our student support team isn't just social emotional, it's also academic. We do RTI, Tier 1, Tier 2, and support. So those are the 2 areas that we're looking at.
I'd like to piggyback on that, if I may, and say, what's the one you're most proud of?
Well, I met with Director Greenherron Monday, and I know that there's always room for improvement, but if you look at our schools' SBAC scores time after time after time, you look at our SAT scores, Little Old South Woodby High School compared to the state, we do really well. And I think Our staff and our students should be congratulated for that.
When it comes to the demographics, does this come straight from like the Skyward when the student enrolls? Is there ever an update to that?
So are you asking an update to
Check their demographics?
check their demographics? Yes. And one of the things too is I go back to gender. We have more than 10 students who don't identify, are non-binary, but they're not in the system that way. And that's something that the students actually have to come in and say. But sometimes there's some parent things and stuff like that. So it does.
When it comes to the ethnicity and race, I've seen that sometimes what's inputted, because it's human input based on the original form, and the form's changed over the years, and that sometimes the identity of the student might change over mixed race from how they identify. And so that might be something that
Yeah, specifically, I met a school board director at WASDA who's a member of a indigenous tribe, and she said that there are people who are both indigenous and fall into the two or more races category, and there's been a movement to sort of like reclaim their status as Native American, even though they technically could truthfully check the two or more races box, since the boxes are, you can only pick one, and race and ethnicity is kind of a more fluid thing and more about a personal identity, that even ethnicity and race could change over a course of student's career.
Well, and you think about it, about 80% of our students that graduate start here at kindergarten. So if they're input a certain gender or race at kindergarten, I'm just assuming they're in the system the whole way through. So that's something, I could talk with Gabe as our registrar about that and maybe figure out how we can send out information to students.
I really appreciate this conversation. Thank you. I know that the labels that are used in demographic studies evolve with as our culture evolves. And I imagine that the practices today are better than they were 13 years ago. And I imagine that the practices of the years to come will be better.
And I'll echo it with our English language learners if they're noting that there's a little bit of a deeper dive into that conversation if they identify a second language. And so through that process, we've identified and corrected or made adjustments based off that information as well. And I think that's my segue. I'll take it. Middle school, we had a great day today. I think there's some tummy aches at home. Right now we had a bake sale that goes to ASB because on the bottom left we had a dance about 3.5 weeks to 4 weeks ago. I can't remember. And it was a really great time. Like it was a lot of fun. And as an adult who typically, you're just happy, but man, the energy and the excitement was there. So bake sale today and probably some tummy aches tonight. So let's see how our middle school's doing. I figured we'd start with attendance because for our best form of intervention is, I'm so glad you're here. So glad you're here today. So semester one, it models exactly as Mr. Patton's layout. 90.32%, 7% unexcused, and then 2.5, so we're having a lot of conversations with parents. We have meetings. If you hit close to 8 or 9 unexcused, we have documentation letters, meetings and plans with families, guardians, and students to have the conversation about, what's going on, why are we late, documentation from medical, if they were an appointment. And it's a really nice collaborative effort, more of a let's problem solve this versus why aren't you coming to school? So it's conversations like that. How are you getting there? And anything that might be in their way. So it's less impactful on them. In comparison to last year, we're trending up as the overall attendance, and then everything else looks pretty on track. Discipline for the first semester. 11 exclusions, as Mr. Patton said, same language choice. And as you were mentioning, a demographic stands out here. If you had noticed, 4 total students, 4 male, all white. Our first goal as a staff is our social emotional goal, targeting students belongingness, welcomeness, and then a connection to a staff member. We look at what the high school asks. We looked at their last survey and some of their longitudinal stuff that we're going to start to introduce to our students, because some of the aha moments they're having, we're looking for that, and we're feeling like our questions, we don't want to over-survey them, but we want to ask a few more questions to make sure there's some more connections that they're having outside of school with friends. Friends is a huge component of the middle school life. So making sure that those are things we're tracking as well. So we started out in the fall. If you want to go to the next slide. That looks familiar because in the fall, we had 60% of students who identified a staff member or a trusted adult. We took it again, I think, right before that snow event. You can go to the next slide, Christy. Thank you. So we looked at it and we're like, wow, we didn't make a lot of progress. But what we do have, just like the high school, is it's not anonymous, and then they have additional commentary and information. So what we found was we went up in enrollment. So we had 10 to 12 students come between fall and winter. So a few students, one kid was like, hey, this is my 3rd day. You guys seem great, but I don't know you yet. So a lot of that conversation and questions. So what we did is we looked at our fall data and our winter data to look at trends of students, and we isolated names to see who have we not made a connection with, and who have we had, and let's make sure we track them because they're red in the fall and then yellow in winter. We want to make sure they are feeling that they have somebody trusted, so that is trending upward. But a big finding we had was new students, and then a few students that were no in the fall and are still no. And so we're looking at what's our next steps with that. And so I thought I would focus on what are our semester 2 activities as a staff. We have come together today during our PD. We looked at, it was student support driven. So we again looked at those no to maybe students, or from fall and winter, to look at trends and patterns to see what we can do to help accommodate that student, make connections, so that they are feeling like they have somebody safe on campus. Again, a lot of those newer students, and so making sure that they are getting connected as they've been here now at least 3 to 4 weeks, maybe a month. So we're making sure that they are feeling like we are trending toward the maybes and the yeses. We're looking at some more lunchtime opportunities. Sorry, Christy. At lunch, we have intramurals. I'll show you a couple pictures in a minute. Some academic and artistic connections for students who need different environments at lunch. The goal is to eat, but the goal is also to be social and to meet your other needs, whether it's physical or whether it's sensory based. So we are looking at, and we offer different places that they can safely go and enjoy themselves at lunch, where there's still a safe place for them to be. We have our House of Reps in ASB, and they're ongoing. And so we will elect another round of our House of Representatives through advisory, so we can diversify who's getting represented and stretching their legs and their leadership skills as well. Because we are so small, it's a little bit of a Tetris game when it looks at balancing class sizes, but then also balancing those peer-to-peer relationships within dynamics of a class. So we might look at student schedules and switch them out of a 2nd period to PE to a 5th period because the dynamics or the class size is smaller. And so that student gets more targeted connection with the teacher that maybe they've identified when they were maybe. So we might switch their schedule a little bit so that they are in a smaller class, and that teacher can give more targeted connection so that we're building more rapport and relationship to them. That's just how small we are. So it's a little bit of a game of Tetris, but we have the conversation. We weigh the pros and cons. Everybody says, well, this is what it would do in this section, or here's what it might look like over here. And so we all either green light it or leave it as is, but thinking about, is this worth it for the student? If we have kids that have been no fall and winter, we're having one-on-one conversations, either with myself, with one of our counselors, with one of our student support specialists or teachers, to see what we can do. What are we missing? How can we connect with them? And then our ASB actually sent out a survey. They were looking for more activities. They want input. They put on the dance and they want to say, what do you guys want to do in spring? So they initiated that, and they're reviewing that tomorrow in ASB. We're looking forward to that. As a staff, we're committing to an off-campus field trips for all grade levels. So a 6th grade field trip, a 7th and an 8th in the spring. And so we're all looking forward to that. Next. Here's some pictures. I just wanted to show you some of the fun. That top right is my buddy Turner, and he's like, you got to share that picture because he made that shot. So he felt pretty good about it. These are some of our activities over the last few weeks, dress-up days, intramurals, assemblies and activities. Advisory is a big component of our SEL or social emotional learning, where there's more explicit lessons and conversations relevant to a middle schooler's life, in our culture of kindness and how we care for one another. So at school this week, a lot of our conversation is around care. We did candygrams for Valentine's Day today, and we made sure every student got at least one so that everybody felt a connection. So it had a personalized note, a connection. So everybody felt a little love. Other conversations around healthy relationships, school enrichment opportunities, anti-bullying, and we're really looking at how do we celebrate each other and our individual growth and our progress. And ASB has really taken that on as well as staff. So that's been a target of ours. Like I said, intramurals, dances. There, the Monday after was like, when's our next dance? Okay, so they had a good time with that. And again, those spring events with field trips. And then some student support. We'll talk more about peer tutoring, small group. Our student support specialists have started a group with 12 middle schoolers looking at their social well-being, and that started last Friday. And then our class reps, Brooke.
Sorry for the interruption. I was just curious, and I haven't asked this ahead of time, so if you don't have the answer off the top of your head, don't worry about it. I was just curious, what percentage of the student population attended the dance?
178 of 270. Yep.
Okay. Okay. I was just
A little over
curious.
2/3. I know
'cause-
that because I counted
yeah,
the tickets.
yeah.
So
Well,
there
The
you
reason
go.
I was asking is because it's a fantastic SEL opportunity and opportunity to build those relationships. And I wanted to know what percentage weren't getting that, or choosing not to get
Yeah.
that, or unable to get it.
Yeah, so we
Yeah.
were a little over 2/3 of our school were there, and it was a great time. So, thanks. If you want to chaperone, let me know. Next slide. Our second goal is that I versus they gap on our CEE survey. So as a staff this year, we have, a goal of mine has been fun. So we had a little fun staff game today and there were laughs. I call it forced fun, but I think that it went over well. I hope. I'll let you know more tomorrow. But looking at more into what are we doing, what's going on down the hall, so that I have an understanding of what you're doing and I know that you are just as committed to this as I am. So what we're doing as a staff, next slide, please. Our staff has divided themselves into PLCs or professional learning communities based off of a common goal. So we have 4 total, and some have a common content area, some have overlapping content areas, but they submitted a proposal for what their PLC time looks like on Wednesdays. One group's doing a book study, one group's doing curriculum development. One is looking at a large-scale common assessment development tool, and then one group's looking at an all-school activity. So they all have different goals. And then what we're going to do is we collectively share information. And then in the spring, we're going to present to one another on what our findings are, what we've done as a group, and what our plan is as we move forward in the lens of student learning, but then also as collaboration to what's going on in our classroom day to day. We're, again, a focus of ours is student celebrations. So we do Cougar Pride Awards. And as a staff, we get together and we sit down and we go through our list of kids and we really talk it through. Because we want to hear about, hey, that kiddo I struggle with in second period, but is thriving in your fourth period. So let's celebrate that. And I want to learn from you in that. The Olympics are back, middle school Olympics. So that is going to be cross-content collaboration in Q4. So we're going to pull in as many content areas as we can. The reason it had gone away for a while is because PE wasn't year-long, whereas a commitment we made this year is that PE is now year-long for all students. So it's back. Again, we're doing spring field trip planning by committee and passion. I say passion because we're going to take a cohort down to Seattle. And on the flip side, we're going to do an outdoor ed opportunity for 6th graders at Warren Beach. So we're trying to allow people to explore and be a part of that based off of what sounds good to them. We're all aligned in one of our goals for our evaluation. So we all track the same data. So our review of that, we all have a common interest to it. It's fun. We always do a staff spotlight in our weekly updates. So that can be a staff can anonymously give a shout out to a staff member, give a spotlight, and share something that they noticed or collaborated with a colleague on, just so they hear from each other, feel celebrated. And it's always cool to see or hear what's going on in other classrooms. We do weekly student support meetings to drive collaboration with the goal of our students. So that could be SEL or social emotional, that could be mental health, that could be academic, that could be behavior, that could be classroom management. So that kind of evolves every week depending on what's on the agenda, but it's a commitment we have. And then we do our monthly culture care meetings that we as a staff are looking at how we care for our culture as a staff, then also to our students.
Before you move on, just out of curiosity about the Olympics, is that athletic only, academic only, or a mixture?
I love it. If you've ever had a PE with Mr. Jakainen, or we have 2 other PE teachers this year, it is a mix of all things. So they will pull in social studies. They'll learn about that country. They'll learn about some science. They'll learn about some measurement. So it's all the things that are all combined.
Excellent.
iReady, as you know, is a common metric. We use K-8 as a district to measure progress in math and reading. So our goal was 80% of students will make at least 1 grade level growth in both math and reading from fall to spring. As of now, we've taken 2 diagnoses. We took fall, and then we just finished winter. So I'm going to show you some progress on that. So on the top line, you see diagnostic 2. Anything in green is students at or above grade level. Yellow is, they would say, approaching, and then red is below grade level. The one below that would be what we took in the fall. So what we're looking for on the top line is growth in green, shrinking in yellow, and less red. And then what I also like at the bottom, how is it disaggregates the number of students who have grown or reduced in that side. So for example, this is reading. So 75% of our students have already met our goal of improving at least 1 grade level. So for example, we had 55 students mid or above grade level when they got there, and now we're at 82 students for a 6A population. Next slide, please. And what we like about this is it breaks down subcategories or domains. As a staff, we've really wanted to highlight vocabulary and then informational text, as those are 2 things that are essential and crucial to critical thinking and as they progress into high school. So the informational text is a common one we look at because a science teacher, social studies teacher will have a common goal around that because that is an area that they focus on in their classroom and they drive strategies in that as well. Next slide, please. Here's our math diagnostic. Again, winter on top, fall on the bottom. So 70% of our students have already met our goal of improving at least 1 grade level. A little bit slower progress, but we're still looking for growth in green and then shrinking in red. And part of that is, if you want to go to the next slide, Christy, thank you. Oh, this just shows a more breakdown of domains. But if you go to the next slide, what are we doing as a staff? So we're looking at our intervention classes. So we have our MetaMath, which is an elective that students have to willingly opt into. And that's driven by conversations. We have data chats with them. So after iReady, a student comes up to the teacher. So students know the conversation about their growth goal versus their stretch growth. There's typical growth and then their stretch growth. It was great. I had a conversation with a student. She goes, I feel really good today. I said, why? She goes, I met my stretch goal. I hit 37 points. That's great. So it was great that that was such a normal part of her vocabulary as well. But for MetaMath, it is a targeted math intervention course taught by one of our math teachers that students opt into that looks at really targeted sub areas of a lot of data points to build their skill. It is not a study hall. They all wish it was. Can you help me in my math homework? Not per se, but it's targeting those holes or those gaps based on SBAC, iReady, and then assessments that they're getting in their general education math class. So that's an area that every quarter we rotate students through so that as a cohort of math teachers, we're talking about who's a good candidate, are they willing, and are they ready? So that we are on our 3rd cohort of that right now. We have a class called Scholar Leader, so they're targeting their leadership skills, but also their lens of what it means to be a scholar and a leader so that you're not leaning too far one way or the other. It's living that balanced life that I think our 2 reps might understand a little bit about. We do offer a modified social studies course, really targeting vocabulary and then informational text at more appropriate reading levels. Again, how is it selected? Data chats with students to teacher and student feedback. And then again, especially for that MetaMath, they have to be willing to sacrifice taking ceramics or another elective for it. But so far we've had a lot of, we actually have 2 students this quarter that asked to take it again. So that's been pretty cool. Like I said, science, social studies, PE, and resource room are all in collaboration in helping students progress in their learning. We look at our instructional practices, UDL, and then some new instructional materials from our ELA adoption has started to have conversations in our resource room and our science and our social studies discussions. The other one I'll highlight from this, I'm not going to read everything, is our peer mentoring program. So we have high school students every semester come and they come into classes and they are a mentor to our students, both academically but also socially. So to me, it's reciprocal. We've expanded that. So this year we started having middle schoolers. So we're in our second quarter of students that are now peer tutors in math classes. So we have 7th and 8th graders that are now mentoring in the younger grades, and it's been a really positive connection, and it's been really wonderful. The first cohort that just finished quarter 2, their conversation about, I asked them, like, how did it feel? And it was, what we expected. It was pretty awkward at first. I watched the teacher a lot, but as it went, they were really reading the room and figuring out the role that they could play with a student. And it wasn't academic. It's being a peer model. It's being willing there to make that connection and let that student know I'm here and I'm here to help you. But you're there more as a social connection. And then finally, there's a new program called Edmentum that we started this fall that our special education team 612 have really grabbed onto. Thanks to Ann Brewer for doing the research on that. And we're starting to get some pretty interesting data with it that our MetaMath teacher is also using it for a little bit of targeted intervention. So we're going to track that this year and then we'll see where it goes. But I'm hopeful that we'll have some nice data that we'll be able to share maybe this time next year to see just some more targeted interventions. Go ahead, next slide. Oh, questions for the middle school?
I wanted to start off with just a comment that fantastic ELA growth is with a new curriculum, just for those following along behind. Usually you see a dip in progress for the first 2 years of a new curriculum. And so seeing that much growth in the first year of a new curriculum is astonishing to me. So congratulations to.
You'll see the same down here.
Yeah.
But, there's a lot of great teachers that this is their 3rd year as a cohort, and they've really kind of found their groove. And so there's a lot of progress and a lot of willingness to just really dig in, and our students are working really hard.
I too noticed that, and it really had me thinking about how, maybe this is oversimplifying, but when you think about what's blocking access to excellence for some students, a question might be, what are the circumstances for the student that are making it harder for them to succeed with what we're offering? But I think on the flip side, the question is, what are the problems with what we are offering that is making it difficult for these students to succeed? And I think that the adoption of the new curriculum really answered that second question and said, we can offer something more appropriate and engaging for all of our students. So congratulations. Nice work.
I really appreciate the breadth and depth of interventions and programs and everything that's going on to find something that's going to connect with every student. It really feels like a implementation of a culture of care and a environment where we honestly believe that every student can succeed. So I have the same question for you that I had at the high school level, and I'll combine Brooke's suggestion, which is what's the data point you're either most concerned about or want to focus on, and then the one you're most proud of.
I heard it when you asked him, and I was like, he's going to ask me that. I should think about it. As a staff, our concerns continue to focus around our students' social, emotional, mental health. And, I know those 4 students who have been excluded from their classes, and I know them well. And there's a lot of our students where we're meeting with families, we're trying things, we're offering unique things. And so that's still probably our biggest area that we are struggling with. So we're trying to move that metric up, especially with those students who have said no twice. Where do we connect? Who can we connect them with? And managing that. And a lot of our conversations sometimes, if they're a student of color, and it's hard as a white person sitting there and trying to empathize and not having walked in their shoes and helping to connect them with that person. So that's an ongoing conversation of helping them to connect or find a connection within our building so that they do feel safe or have someone that is at least a trusting person that they can lean into. And then a celebration, ELA, those numbers were really exciting to see, especially 8th grade. We have a phenomenal teacher in that class. So it's great to see that metric moving. And you walk in there and there's a lot of engagement and a lot of critical thinking from their social studies classes to their English classes. A lot of high level annotations, a lot of intensive text, and a lot of really in-depth conversation. I should send you a couple samples of their ode poems that show both humor and depth in their understanding of what the assignments are asking, but really show and highlight just who they are as 13 and 14-year-olds.
Love to have them present some of them here.
Okay, the pressure, I will pass that message on to some friends.
My question might be a little more general, but I'm curious to know if you have some highlights and maybe some opportunities to share around how it's been to invite 6th graders into your middle school community.
I'll say this cohort is a really, really sweet cohort. So it's been really fun welcoming them. That first week, I asked a teacher, I was like, am I being too harsh? Because we had to think about our environment a lot with what they came from. They came from a mostly outdoor campus. And so their transitions there coming to ours looked and sounded a lot different. So I want to highlight and celebrate those students for recognizing and learning, and our staff being explicit with, this is what it looks like to be a middle schooler. This is what it looks like in the hallway. This is what it looks like in the bathroom, in the lunchroom. And we've reiterated that. So that's a celebration that they know. The conversations we're having is, how are you going to help the incoming 6th graders navigate our campus? Because they're coming now from elementary into a middle high. So what's that going to look like? So a big celebration for staff and students alike there was explicit teaching, there was explicit conversation to it. And then how do we pass that forward? What was the second half, Ann? I'm sorry.
Just if there's any opportunities that you see moving forward through the year or transitioning into next year for continuing to build that cohort of 3 grades instead of 2.
Yeah, and that it kind of aligns to the bond conversation. I'm really enjoying just the joy of them still being children. It's been very present with how we offer celebrations, and a dance isn't more a high school dance, but are there activities that's more developmentally appropriate? So we're looking at, how do we still provide that childhood experience as they transition and bridge into high school? So the bond conversation, what can we offer out back so that there is room for play? And I do think even high school students, if we had opportunities, would still utilize some spaces. So we make sure that we are buffering in more physical movement. So that's why PE has been committed for year long, but as well as we transition with the bond, what do we need so that our 11-year-old friends and 12 and 13 and 14 still have access to, so that they can meet their needs every day? Yeah.
Once again, I'll explicitly open up to the community members who are here and our student reps. I know that y'all would feel comfortable chiming, or I hope that y'all would feel comfortable chiming in whenever you have comments or questions, but I also want to make it an explicit handout if you have anything to share.
Right, ready. Hi, everybody. Excited to talk with you about South Whidbey Elementary School. I wanted to start with this lovely quote from one of our teachers. I think it really sets the stage for South Whidbey Elementary School. I'm immensely proud of how my students have grown academically this year and how they've grown as classmates, playmates, and citizens. I've seen that a child's growth and thriving in each of these areas is so interconnected with the others. And I just really wanted to highlight that because I think that's going to be a big part of my conversation with you tonight, is around that critical balance. If you can go to the next slide, Christine. And that's what I really wanted to just be very explicit about, is while we recognize the value of our academic success, of course, as we welcome 5-year-olds who've never had school experiences and children who are really just learning what school is all about, that social, emotional, mental health piece takes on such a powerful drive in our school. We know, right, that children have to feel cared for and loved and connected for them to really dive into their academics. And so I think you're going to see tonight on the data we present about that balance we're trying to achieve. Next slide, please. This is a great example of kind of how we do that with our Farm, Forest, and Sea focus. We really get kids excited about how how many people does it take to go around a tree? And how do we translate that to measurement? And how do we learn? Farmer Jay does such an incredible job in the garden of bringing an interdisciplinary approach to our outdoor learning programs. So just wanted to kind of set the stage with that. Next slide, please. Our first goal is around reading, and it's really all about adoption and implementation of our Amplify curriculum, and really about making sure our teachers felt ready. It's a big push to get a brand new curriculum delivered in August and launch in. And I just have to congratulate my staff on the incredible job they have done, and with Kayla's support and the pilot team of not only jumping in and doing it, but when you'll see the progress that our students have made. Next slide, please. So just a quick overview of the professional development that was offered. We started in June of 2023 with a leadership team before the curriculum ever got here, but beginning to frame how we were going to do this and what it was going to look like. And then multiple trainings in August, September, and October to bring the different levels of the Amplify curriculum. There's the tier 1, if you would, element of Amplify, as well as tier 2, which is the boost, and tier 3, which is M-Class. And so the learning that's gone into each of those elements has been a big push for our teachers. Next slide, please. So the Amplify, as we say, is being provided to all K-5 students. Professional development has been provided. This document, the presentation, is what Kayla put together, and we just added some additional elements that we've been presenting to our OSSI partners at OSPI. And then just the strong progress we saw in our iReady diagnostic, as Brooke brought up, it's really typical to see a little loss when you implement, and we definitely are not seeing that. Next slide, please. So this is our iReady reading data with our comparison between fall of 23 and winter of 24. We've really put a push on in our yellow students, those students who are almost there. In both math and reading, it's been a focus for lots of small intervention-based instruction between our Orca reading and our classroom learning rotations. So again, seeing nice growth, and then a good decrease in those reds and yellows. Next slide, please. Really want to congratulate, you can see by grade level here, our third grade team in particular. It's pretty phenomenal. And when we look at individual student growth, that's even more exciting. Couldn't go into that here, of course, but when you look at some of these kiddos, it just has blown my mind to see the growth that they've made. So we're pretty excited about having a consistent curriculum across grade levels. Next slide, please. Our next goal is around our social emotional growth, and really we're focusing on, we'll show the survey data, but about 25% of our students were identified as needing additional tier 2 or 3 supports, which is a pretty big number. So our goal is just to begin to track a continuous decrease in those kiddos needing that deeper level of support. Next slide, please.
For those listening in, would you just briefly summarize what a tier 2 or 3 support is?
Sure.
Thank you.
Tier 1 means all students. Every child receives tier 1 instruction, whether it's academic or social emotional. Tier 2 is the next level, where typically around 15% of kids may need a deeper level, a little more intervention. And then tier 3 is that most extensive level of support that's needed.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So just a couple pictures of some of the ways that we're providing that SEL support. I've only captured a few of them here because there's so many good things going on, but our clubs have been phenomenal. On the right is the assembly. We just had Science on Wheels from the Pacific Science Center, thanks to our PTA, our food drives, giving that leadership opportunity with our ASB and other students. Yeah, just so many opportunities for children to connect in so many different ways. Next slide, please. So 100% of our K-5 students receive tier 1 instruction, social emotional learning curriculum, Caring School Communities, and that's where our classroom circles and where we're using that restorative circle and circles every day. It's such a part of our school now that, you know, it's just a part of who we are in so many ways. Again, we've taken that data and I'll show you a little bit of that for our SEL survey from the fall. And then we have a tier 2 team that's made up of our mental health team, student support, our principal, our SPED team folks. And we've analyzed that data and implemented those tier 2 and 3 services based on those survey results. Next slide, please. Can you open the top link? I'm not going to go into the second one, but if folks are interested, it's there for you. You can go on to the next slide. We can just scroll down. Yeah, let's stop at that one, please. The next one, there you go. So we took our survey data at our January 10th. Our tier 2 team had already looked at all our SEL data, but our entire staff came together in this room and we really looked closely. We took each data point and put it up on the walls. And then people went around and we worked together on what can we do? How do we address each of the elements outlined? Next slide, please. So these are just some of the supports that we've already put into place, and then talking about how are we going to even enhance what we're doing here. Next slide, please. Again, this is just an overview of that work that we've been doing together. What are the positives that the team, divided into teams of 6 people? What areas of growth does your team identify? And then these action items. Next slide, please. So we'll just go through a few of these, but these are some of the questions and then some of the work that the staff engaged in as they looked at those, at that data. So right down to even looking, so I feel safe and comfortable on the playground. People were saying, well, maybe say recess instead of playground because children can be, you know, just little suggestions like that. Assigning special adults, kind of what we've heard from middle school and high school. Really making sure teachers are aware of who those almost never kiddos are. So there's those special check-in time in the morning. We even have started where, you know, our doors don't open until 8:20, but we have a handful of children that we know need that 5 minutes in the morning with their teachers, and their teachers are very willing to do that. And so that's been just a simple thing that's really made such a difference. There was one kiddo that wouldn't even come in the building in the beginning of the year. And it's just been a really beautiful thing. Just that little time together has made such a difference. See, I think we skipped a slide there, Christy. If you can go back, yeah. No, one, there you go. No, back. One more back. There you go. I just wanted to. No, we haven't gotten to lunchroom yet. There we go. Anyway, I'm a little confused now, but I think, yeah, they're not all included in here. I guess we'll just jump to this one. I feel safe at school. You can see those numbers, and again, focusing on those almost never category. All right, next slide, please. The lunchroom is a challenge for anyone who's had lunch in an elementary classroom before, or elementary lunchroom before. We've really looking at how we can help. Just some kids just can't handle it. It's just too loud for them. And so we're really been working on alternative lunchroom areas. A number of teachers have opened their classrooms for those kiddos that just really can't handle it. We've been playing calming music, but you can't hear the calming music, unfortunately. So we're working on that. Just looking at a number of different ideas, and we have started also a couple lunch bunch groups that have been really successful using this space and other spaces. And then in the spring, we're hoping to offer some more outdoor eating options as well. Let's just do one more of these because there's a lot of them. Oh, that's where we were before. Yeah, let's go to the next one. Let's stop right here. Thank you. I like coming to school every day. Changing the wording to I like being at school because the bus ride is a big challenge. Buses are a challenge right now. Again, assigning teachers, and they're on it already. Continued outdoor learning experiences, helping with the bus for those kids that are really struggling. And, you know, looking at ways we can creatively have more support in the morning. Brooke's here every morning. You kind of see.
Well, and I was looking at this and seeing every day,
Yeah,
like,
oh, exactly, right.
I don't, there's nothing that I like to do every day.
Right. We took this language from our survey from the our Caring School Communities, our SEL curriculum, but we're gonna tweak it a little bit. All right, go ahead and come out of that slideshow and go back to the other one if you would, Christy. I invite you to look at these more closely if you're interested. Okay, next slide, please. Again, just a few more pictures of our SEL in action. Our mediator program is so sweet. It's really, really making a difference for our younger kiddos and giving that empowerment to our older kids. Reading with Rover, oh my goodness, what a popular day that is when he comes in. And it's so beautiful to watch some of our kiddos who don't talk very much, talking to the dogs. It's beautiful. Next slide, please. Tier 3 SEL services. So as you know, we have mental health therapy in our schools through our ESD 189 program with Amanda Potter. And then one day a week, we have a mental health therapist from Compass Mental Health who comes in and provides services to our kids. So 5% of the kids in our school are receiving that tier 3 level of support. 8% are receiving in their special education services through social emotional behavior, a small group and one-on-one intervention. So 13% of the students in our school are receiving tier 3 SEL services, and that's a lot of kids. And I think it really speaks to what's going on, right? Culturally, socially, big picture. A lot of kids coming with a lot of needs. Next slide, please. Next goal, our final goal is around math. And really working on this idea of helping children to have more metacognition around their own learning processes, and especially with math, because math, it's amazing and sad to me because I was one of those kids, how at an early age, children start saying, I'm not good at math. I don't like math. I can't do math. So we're really trying to work on kind of an empowerment thing for them to be able to see their own growth and celebrate their own growth. And I'm feeling really positive about what we're seeing through that. So we're saying that our goal is around, growth, of course, with our iReady data. Next slide, please. So here are some of the key pieces we're engaging in. We formed this lovely partnership. Her name is Tina Mott. She's an ESD 189 math specialist, and she has adopted our school, which has been so lovely. Really has met with all of our teachers at this point, both through one-on-one, small group, team meetings, and staff presentations. And it's been really effective, the strategies that she's bringing in. This spring and winter, she's specifically working with our special education team on their math instruction, doing some modeling, coaching, and helping with some intervention. And then the other thing that's been amazing is Sue Sage, I remember Mrs. Sage, is coming back from her retirement to engage in some small group skill-based intervention. And what's been super cool about that is the teachers are using this kind of the pre-assessment before the unit begins and seeing what skills our kids are deficit in, and then they're joining these groups, but it's not an ongoing. There's some kiddos who are really good with this skill and not good at all with this skill. And so they're moving in and out of these groups in a really fluid way. But the data that Sue's collecting is she's progress monitoring as they go along. They're usually doing 3 week, depending on the skill, small groups 2 to 3 times a week. And we're really seeing some awesome growth. Next slide, please. This is our math data. It's not quite as strong as our reading data, but we're still seeing growth. Again, really working on that yellow. That's the kiddos that Sue is mostly seeing, those that are really on the verge of making that next leap. Next slide, please. Just wanted to talk briefly about our CEE survey updates. I've been really lucky to have Ronnie has come in and engaged in a staff development training around the CEE and just informational. Why do we do this? Why is it important? Why does it matter? Because our engagement was really low last year, and we're going to be providing time this year to our staff as well to make sure that the number is up and to help them understand the value and how it can help us be better. She also came in and did training with our my coffee with the principal parents, and that was really powerful as well because again, just building that understanding has been of great value. Next slide, please. So again, just looking at that, some of those questions for staff, specifically the I versus they gap and how we can, what does it mean was the first question that the staff engaged in. And then how do we strengthen that? How can we work together to strengthen that? Next slide, please. So this is just a few things. We really believe that the staff climate is one way to really support that change. And these are just some of the elements that we're doing. We've done this inclusion kudos, so staff nominate one another and they get a little recognition at our staff meetings for innovative UDL practices and inclusive strategies they're using. Just some fun we have together. The whole staff went down and dyed indigo one training with Farmer Jay so they could get a chance to be down at the farm, which was super cool. We have staff committees and then our Sunshine Committee that really works to support and help our staff members through good times and challenging times. Next slide, please. Just want to talk briefly about our discipline data. We use a really cool program, School-Wide Information System, or SWIS data. So we have what are called blue slips, and when there's a behavioral issue at school, a blue slip is completed. We, write out the information and then what the intervention was, and then we take all those blue slips and we enter them into the SWIS system, and it gives us some incredible data. If you don't mind, let's see. Can you go to the next slide, Christy? I'm just going to show you a few of these, and then if you want to dive in deeper, there's a full report in the link on the slide before. But this is it gives us average referrals per day per month. You can see October's a little challenging. The honeymoon's over. And yeah. So this has been is really interesting. We've got this comparison from year to year that we can use as well. Next slide, please. Check out this one. What do you think this tells us? It's after school. It's on the bus. That's where, so all my bus reports that come in as well get entered into the SWIS data system. And so this is something we're really, really focusing on around our behavioral challenges is the bus time. So bus charts and seating charts are underway. So again, just really helpful data for us. Next slide, please. One more. This is some of the multi-year data, just to talk about, referrals per day, per month, comparing it between the years. It's kind of good to see in January, we're going down a little bit right now, and I hope that trend continues. Next slide, please. This is our attendance data. Pretty similar to what the other schools have shown. Again, really working closely with families. That's the number one piece is the letters are great, but it's getting on the phone and saying, I'm really worried about your kiddo because he's really not being able to keep up with the class and doesn't feel a part of things. So it's that personal connection and relationship with parents that I think is making a difference. Next slide, please. And then just the report card data, I just put the link there. This was a slide that I put together, slides with our report card data. Next slide, please. I think we're done. And now back over to, well, you might have some questions for me, but then Kayla's going to talk a little bit about curriculum.
Susie, thank you. I noticed in your referral data that there's a nice little lull between 10 and 11. Do you know what's happening there?
That's reading. Reading with, no. No, the lull is probably it's the beginning of the day. Sorry. Beginning of the day, and everybody's kind of calm when they first,
But it's not though, because you've got, you got
Oh,
a little
oh.
bit of spiciness going on. And then at 10, all of a sudden it just like, whew.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Maybe 10
I
is
have-
the first recess.
I have
morning
some
recess.
wonders about what's happening at 10 and 11 across the building.
Yeah, that's not recess time yet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because our first recess is at 11:30. Our first morning recess is when kindergartners go out before they go into lunch. Interesting. I will explore that a little more. They're
So-
just in class as far as I know.
Maybe they can hear the calming music at that point.
In second grade, that's walk to read.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it is for the other grades,
Yeah,
but
for each grade level is a little bit different,
Yeah.
but interesting. Yeah. Other
Yeah,
questions?
I'm curious. This is not a question to be answered tonight, but a question to be pondered. What are some of the interpersonal and cultural practices that are supporting healthy behaviors in school that could be reproduced on the bus? Realizing, of course, that staffing is different and physical context is different, but are there some practices that could somehow be brought into the bus environment?
I'll just make one really quick comment on that. We really are, I was joking about the seating church, but it really is a critical piece to keep our youngers up closer and those kiddos who have challenges right behind the driver. And again, lots of communication with families is helping in a number of instances.
I'll echo to that one as middle school. I've been hopping on more, and me and the bus driver try to build our rapport. We talk with students so that they see this collaborative connection. I'll have a bus driver who there's a couple that'll hop off or come back to say, hey, I wrote this up. Can we have a conversation? So they are embedded in that restorative conversation as well. I've got a kiddo, she does orca breaths when she feels overwhelmed, which is a breathing strategy that she was taught here. So it's helping those kids generalize, but a lot of it is connections to our bus drivers, to our students too. Like they did, we asked them to do write-ups of who they are, interests of theirs, so their kids can learn a little bit more about them as people driving an incredibly large vehicle. Then the seating chart, and then the moods at the beginning of the day, and then at the end of the day, it's bringing it all into this tiny little vessel. So helping kids manage that appropriately is incredibly unique while driving. How much does that weigh? 40,000-pound bus.
And
Thank you.
one of the things we're doing too is oftentimes the driver is only having interaction with the child when they're in trouble. And so we do this little thing called golden bus tickets, just a positive, some more positive interventions and recognizing those children who are doing a good job, because most of them are. Another way to support.
I was wondering on all of these statistics how the fifth grade being added to that school has affected the general culture and like entire statistics of the school and stuff, and how
Great question.
those guys are fitting into the lunchroom and everything.
Yeah, it's an interesting too, because with Kayla's sixth graders coming up, they were brand new to that school. Our fourth graders just got to move up, right, and stay in the building. It's been interesting because we are doing a modified rotation schedule. So they have a homeroom teacher, but they go to another teacher for science and another teacher for math. And that's the first time we've done that in this building before. So we've had some growing pains, but generally it provides them that opportunity to really feel like they're the oldest, and they're at that in between, between being, one of the youngers and a preteen. So it's great. They're providing some really powerful leadership.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate attempts to keep independence there in the fifth grade. I know that's definitely a very like crucial grade for me, at least, because that was like when I was first getting independence and things.
Yeah, exactly.
Appreciate that we're keeping some of that with still being in the same building.
Yeah, I agree, Carter. Thank you. Anything else?
I just want to share some appreciation for recognizing and really looking at this data around, where the challenges might be for kids during the day, because lunchrooms are challenging. And so kids at a very early age being able to recognize that they have other resources, like anecdotally, some of the kids I work with in drama club, they're like, we love your drama club and all, but also it's quiet in here, or it's a different holding of space. And so it's really valuable. And I just appreciate, your staff doing that extra work to be a welcoming space for kiddos who need something different for whatever reason, without there having to be a reason why that's different. So for me, that's a huge, deep appreciation that you guys are willing to do that work. So thank you.
I'm sharing a question from the community coming in from Zoom. Lori from Langley, do you know what percentage of students are starting school without any previous early childhood education or preschool?
We definitely have that data. I don't have it in my head at this time. We go out and meet with all the preschools before the end of the school year, so we begin to learn who may be coming our way. So we do definitely have collaboration with those preschools, but I don't have that number. What would you guess?
We know that we have 16 students that we were able to serve this year in TK, or transitional kindergarten. So they are 4-year-old students that would not have otherwise had preschool. So we're happy about being able to do that.
Absolutely.
I don't know when they get here.
60% maybe?
At least 60% of them have had a
Had a
preschool
preschool
experience,
experience.
but we are guessing at best.
I can definitely get you that data.
Before I get to the question I've asked everybody else, I also have a wonderment that your very first slide prompted me to think of the balance between social emotional and academic learning. And this is for the board and the leadership team in the process by which we set our goals. We're sort of agnostic as to that balance. We set the categories and then Dr. Moshe breaks those down into key indicators. And I wonder if it's appropriate or advisable for the board to set a more explicit direction in how we expect to see that balance, or if the existing system is the more appropriate, where it's the educational professionals who make that decision. So again, not to be solved tonight, but at the appropriate time when we do our goal setting.
Something that just struck me as you said that, Director Green-Heron, is my follow-up question to my appreciation should have been, what supports, policy-wise, can we offer practitioners as they are doing, what amounts to extra heart work to make sure that kids all feel safe? Like what in our policies, what in how we set the categories could be helpful to that work. And it's not an answer tonight question.
Right.
It's another pondering and curiosity as we move farther and farther into being able to offer every kid a trusted place and a trusted person.
Thank you. I would love to ponder that with my
There's a
Colleague.
clear answer to that. It's lobbying for more funding to support all of our students. We know that that we're paid well, but we also know that the budget doesn't support the number of people that we need to have on staff to support all of our students. So we grapple with that every single day, right? We can have less behavioral challenges on a bus if there were a second adult instead of 60 students and a driver. We could have mental health needs addressed if we could have mental health counseling to the degree we need it. And those are really difficult. Dan and I were at a presentation this afternoon talking about what we're facing in the upcoming negotiations as a state, and the fact that teachers as unions are recognizing that it's not just about individual pay. It's really about, we don't have enough people to support the work that we need to do for our kids. So I would love to be able to get more money to do what we need to do, but that's out of all of our hands.
If I can just echo that, I've asked some of my some of the professional educators that I admire most that question around how do you do what you do and how can we reproduce it for every student? And I would say across the board, the answer is tell the federal and state governments to give us the money we need to hire the people to be in these rooms and build these relationships with these children.
I always think that the paraeducator ratios that we have is incredibly telling in that, where, correct me if I have these numbers wrong, but the state pays us for 9 and we have 22 on staff, something along those lines. So They pay us for 3, sorry. And there are 22 on staff across the district. I think that's the right number.
Not anymore. It's higher than that.
Higher than that now. Sorry, I'm trying to remember back to the budget documents. But
Right.
The state pays for a very small, 10% of the paraeducators, the people who are in the students' lives as much as the certificated teachers. And that would make a huge, huge difference. And thank you to our community, because the levy that you support pays for the others.
And it's a statewide issue. I mean, this is not unique to us in any way, but the mental health challenges that our students and the students across the country actually are facing, for whatever reason, really doesn't matter why, they're presenting themselves to school, and we need to be able to support them. And it's really difficult to do all the things we need to do. So
Thank you for
that's
those
my
reminders
soapbox.
and that
My
insight.
soapbox.
Appreciated soapbox. Thank you.
And in addition to the lobbying, which we need to continue to do, I would just say I appreciated your expression of interest in holding on to that, wondering around what other policy changes the board can make to support the capacity to be successful as educators. So yes, and thank you.
I would even go a step beyond what this board can do to what we can try to get the legislature to enact in policy, because that's one thing that they are more likely to do than give more money. And Ms. McCarroll, for the record, that was Lori Johnson of Langley who made the comment.
Though I would caution us that asking for policy change without funding change often results in an unfunded mandate, which increases the burden.
Thank you. Before we move on to the curriculum, I'd just like to note to all 3 of you, thank you for the presentations. They're detailed, they're explicit. I can see the through lines in each one of the schools, but also the different approaches that are appropriate for the different ages that you're dealing with. So I really appreciate the specificity and the care that went into that. So thank you.
Can I ask one more question, Ms. Richard? That's the same question I've been asking everybody. But also, I first want to say it's really great to see, despite the challenges, just how much care and just fostering that sense of wonder and learning among our youngest students, and just sort of seeing them at school where it's sort of like a magical time for them. It's really amazing to see, and to see the data behind it. And now I'll let you answer the question.
And I can answer really quickly. My biggest challenge and worry is the tier 3 services, because it represents some of our kids who are really suffering and have very big challenges. And that's the absolute hardest part of this job. And the biggest celebration is our reading ELA growth. We're super excited about that and the integration of this new curriculum. Thank you.
Nice segue. Thank you. We are in year 1 of our K-12 ELA curriculum adoption. So I'll give you a little snapshot or some timelines for some more accurate data, because there's some data points that as a team, we looked at what we're seeing now versus what we might see in June versus this time next year. As you know, K-5, the timeline Ms. Richards went over, there are assessments that are embedded into Amplify, DIBELS being one of them, which is a screener for dyslexia. So that's approved through the state, which is why it's used. That was a nice draw to Amplify because it was a component that was already built in. And the timeline Boost, if you have a kiddo at home, it might be Curioso. I don't know if your kiddo brings it home, but it's that platform. So it's that tier 2 online program that looks at individual diagnostic assessments. So for example, when I went to my parent-teacher conference, I was given the Boost update, and it showed individualized progress, target areas, areas of growth, that it builds out learning pathways. It's generated through technology, through AI, if you will, so that teachers are using that information, that data, when they go to teach Amplify to their whole class, but then they have these targeted pathways through Boost to allow students for individual progress. And there's some nice short, frequent assessments and feedback for teachers to get snapshots of who's on track, who's at risk, who's low risk, for informed instruction. So those are great. And we just surveyed teachers, and you'll see a couple points of that in just a second. So there's some nice data points that are starting to come out of it. Because it is year one, we didn't want to put too much pressure on teachers, since we still use iReady, to make that, we didn't want to overtest. So they're still going through the curriculum and they're still utilizing what they have, but we are going to give it more of a longitudinal look before we bring data to something that might influence or impact what we're teaching or how we're teaching. So yeah, year 1 and 2 is for implementation and alignment. So we'll still utilize iReady for some longitudinal progress, specific in K-5. In 6-12, we've implemented those scope and sequences that we so desperately needed to have alignment. It was awesome I have a friend teaching 10th grade, and he said, hey, some kid came today and said, hey, in 8th grade, we read this, are those connected? And so the kid remembered the title and asked, is that all connected? And it was just like, yes. It felt good. Those new instructional materials, teachers really focused in on how they are very skilled in their knowledge. How they teach it to our students was a really big focus. So we invested in some instructional materials so their teachers could enhance that. Some new technology and subscriptions, and then textbooks in 10th, 11th, and 12th. There's a big development in some data. 6 through 8, we will continue to use iReady and then newly utilized Edmentum platform. So we're going to track that to see if it might become more of general use or still more of our tier 2, tier 3 populations, and see what that kind of data is going to give us over time. For 9 through 12, the team worked within their fall semesters to do a common lit assessment for pre and post. Finding time and having only half of their population, we decided that we're going to do that and have some baseline data off of that in June to use the year long versus just this one snapshot. And then they are creating a common rubric, and then we'll do some norming to grading so that process is more equitable versus knowing your own student. They found some really great platforms for some online programs. AI is a conversation that they're having in their classrooms as they're sending students off to college, and what they can anticipate, what OSPI is telling us, what ESG is telling us, and what colleges are telling us. So they are looking at how they have those conversations and embed appropriate access and digital citizenship with AI. Membeam is a tool that is using its targeting and vocabulary. I tried to meet with their rep a couple times. She got COVID, so we are meeting next Monday. But once I get that, I'll drop that in there and let you know. But again, we're looking for more longitudinal because wasn't the first thing we introduced in our classes in the fall. So some students are just now getting into the swing. It's incremental over time to build the stamina and introduce these topics to them. Some novels, and then those instructional practices are the really big focus. It's been really fun to have conversations with students about the novels that we poured over tediously and the messages and conversations they're taking away from it. So it's a really great experience to get to go in and see who has been drawn to that book or what teacher gave that student that novel and put it in their hands. So that's kind of a snapshot of where all of our fantastic teachers are at with regard to the implementation process. And there's a couple more slides I want to cruise through to give you some snapshots. This is that K-8 data snapshot for you. The faded triangle on the right is fall. The one on the left was last month. And somebody's like, well, how come so few students didn't take it? That's a number. There's a few students enrolled in other programs that wouldn't take iReady or sickness. So it's always kind of one of those grain of salt. We never get 100% on that. But you'll notice that tier 1 population went from 36 to 52% K-8. So that's at or above grade level mid-year. And that tier 2 and 3, those are shrinking as well. The nice one to see there is especially that at risk from 30 to 18, which is more appropriately at a percentage for tier 3. Next slide, please. This is Susie's. You've already seen that. Just again, that nod to amplify and the commitment to it from her staff. We surveyed teachers and asked them a bunch of questions about how it's going anecdotally. What are you noticing? What do you still need targets in? So we can frame our PD to that. The two that really stood out to us were, I've seen growth in my students' reading and literacy progress, mostly steady growth, which I think we're happy with. Most teachers are, as you struggle with the new curriculum you've never been in, that students are still making steady growth. And the one that I thought that feels really good to read is students show pride in their progress in reading and ELA skills, similar to before, and then over 40% said a lot. Like Susie said, that balance, we're teaching them reading and literacy, but also we want them to take pride in what they're understanding about and how they feel about their ability to access reading. So that one we wanted to highlight. This is the 6-8, which you've seen before. Again, just a lot of green growth in that process as they're implementing that new work. Next slide, please. Again, that 9-12. So here's just a snapshot of some of those things you'll get some more data from as we continue to progress. And that's our curriculum on the top right that they are utilizing. And then Common Lit for their common assessment. So I look forward to that data when we do that norming in the spring, and that'll come your way. One of you had asked for a snapshot of students in a pre-COVID cohort and what that progress has looked like over time. So this is a lot of numbers, but if I know you, I think you all like numbers. So here's a snapshot from current fourth graders. So they would have been first graders taking this remotely at home this time winter 2021. So you can see the percentages at or above in the nearing and then below. So they did math and reading winter 2021, and then it progressed up to winter 2024. So that drop in winter 2023, especially in math, and then it's kind of driven back up at that at or above, but then still some drop in the below. And then reading, 47% were at or above, 49 nearing, and 4% below. When we proctored it remotely, I already took in some variables to that. So the accuracy of that data is something they say to take with a grain of salt. Who was sitting next to that kiddo when they took it, or how much they engaged in their learning throughout the last, it was January 2021. So we were still just getting ready to come back to in-person learning. And then we see a decent incline, and then that reading 2021 or 2024, excuse me. And I'm going to talk about that one in just a second after I show you the second cohort and why that might be what it is right now in winter versus spring. So these are, thank you, current eighth graders, friends that I have in my campus. So they were fourth graders when they were third graders when we started remote, and then when they took this as fourth graders and now eighth graders. So their math has stayed pretty steady in the snapshot at winter. Reading also quite steady in that little drop. Something I wanted to note about this is when you take a winter diagnostic, you tend to see your greatest growth from winter to your spring diagnostic when you're January to May. So I couldn't grab, we haven't gotten spring 2024 yet. So I'll be curious to look at spring 2021 to spring 2024 to see where those gaps in that closing is. So that's one of those grain of salt things. They've had access to their new curriculum, in this case for 4 months. So we'll see what 9 months looks like.
Thank you. I was the nerd who asked for that.
I didn't want to call you out.
Excellent.
No, you're good. This is another way to look at progress as of winter 2024. So what already gives us a metric of percentage of students likely to meet their individual growth goals by spring. So we have that in fall, we have that in winter, and then in spring we have that. So I wanted to look at that percentage to give us another just metric. So in 2021, we had 57% of our students that were likely to meet their individual growth goals on iReady. This year we're at 92%. Chris, if you go to the next slide. This is what you see. So even though the greens, yellows, reds look almost similar, they're looking at individualized students. So this is a little bit more targeted approach to, okay, when I look at this, but who's in my red that hasn't made enough individual progress? So even if they're at grade level, I still expect them to grow. Right now, 92% of our students are on track to meet their individual growth or their stretch growth goals. They call it typical growth or stretch growth goals. So you're already seeing a different metric that shows a little bit more accurate reflection of just coming out of the pandemic remote to in-person learning today.
Can I ask a question about those personal growth goals? Have the practices around how those goals are set changed year over year?
Through iReady?
Yes. In
iReady-
terms of, like, my question would be, would the explanation for the significant improvement in that score be potentially tied to how the goal setting practices have evolved, or is it?
The goal setting practice is numerical. So it's student who's in the light green zone, they would expect to make 20 to 30 points of growth, whereas a student in the red zone, they would expect to make 40 to 50 points. So it's targeted to where their baseline is to where their growth is throughout the school year.
I see. That's great. Thank you. That's helpful explanation.
Escape out, actually. John's got one more slide. If you escape. Again. And then John's going to close it out, and then any other questions, and then here you go.
Just wanted to share with, I know the school board's aware, but also the community and other community members that are here, that there's a lot more information you get from the OSPI report card on our district for all of our schools and programs. And so I just wanted to share this link.
Thank you. I know that there was a lot of work that went into putting together those cohort assessments. I just really like them because it shows the same group of kiddos year over year to see how we're serving them, rather than, because some classes are higher, some classes are lower. And so I like it because it shows the same class, how we're serving the same students year
Agreed.
over year.
And the cohort I'm going to be curious to watch is this year's kindergartners, because their baseline of reading instruction is Amplify. So to see what theirs looks like into second grade year in comparison to maybe a cohort before that had a different experience.
So the board knows this information, but this is always a year old at least in terms of data, which is why the principals have given you the updated data. But I think what's really interesting is if you scroll up, Christy, and down on the left side, you can look at these measurements and look at the trend lines. So, for example, if you look at, scroll down a bit, you want to look at the discipline data and the trend line. If you open that, Christy. Yeah. So you can see it, and it disaggregates what is allowable to disaggregate, but you can look specifically and dive more in depth to see how does it look for our district. Again, keeping in mind that it's a year old. So again, there's a lot of data in there for not just that opening page. The opening page does not tell the story. It is linked on the website, and this whole slideshow will be on the website as well. But you can close that now, Christy. I just wanted to put it out there that you can really do a lot of disaggregating all on your own now with the report card. And as we finish up, I don't know if the board has further questions, but the work that the principals and the teaching staff and everyone has done around helping our students progress, it's not the first year they've done it, right? But it's always good to be able to engage in a data summit and see how we're doing based on the goals that you've set for us. So appreciate that we've taken all this time. I reinforce to the principals, despite the fact that it's Valentine's Day and they've been in school all day with kids that have gotten lots of candy, to take the time to really move through all of the data and demonstrate the growth and the areas of concern and the celebrations. So it's all their heavy lifting. So thank you.
I really also want to echo the comments that came before about the honesty shown in this and the openness about, look, these are challenges and here's how we're working on them. One last opportunity for board members, community members, student reps, each other, if you have any questions or comments.
I actually have a question for our student board representatives. When you hear about the goals that we set and that you help us set, and then you hear about how those goals are being addressed through the programs that are implemented in schools, do you feel that students, especially at the high school level where you both attend, do you feel that students know about some of those goals or feel the impact of those programs firsthand? And I'm thinking in particular about the questions around, does every student in that building have a trusted adult that they feel they can turn to? Do you think that students are aware that teachers and administrators are working to make that a reality? Or do you feel like it's a little disconnected from the day-to-day student experience?
I think with the students having an adult, a lot of students are aware that uh, the administrators want everyone to be able to have someone, and that how you respond on the surveys, like if you say you don't have anyone, the administrators will help you find someone and talk to and grow and figure out why, and not just like see that and move on. And I think that's good. And I think that's also good to see with students who answer surveys kind of carelessly. They then see, okay, I answered this a certain way because I didn't care how I answered this survey. And now I'm having discussions about do I have a trusted adult to go to? Because on this one day, I was like, I'm just going to put what I think is funny. So I think it's good that those students are seeing that what they answer is affecting, like, just the administrators, and then the students that actually need the support and want the support are getting the support that they need.
Thank you.
Yeah, kind of expanding on what like Kaya said, it's kind of well known at this point that the survey isn't anonymous. Students know that they're being like asked personally almost. I feel like a lot of students know that there definitely is a works trying to get the connections, I guess. I forget what it's called, but I'm not sure if they know what it's I don't know if they know what the ultimate goal of it is. They know that they're trying to get them connected with adults, but I'm not sure they know the ultimate like end goal of it really. Which I don't know if that's necessary to know really, but like, yeah.
Sure. Thank you very much. And I guess my follow-up question would be for administrators. Is there a different way that purely anonymous data is collected so that we might have an opportunity to know from among the students who don't feel that there's a trusted adult in their life, which of them are choosing not to answer that question honestly in order to avoid being subject to an uncomfortable intervention?
Thank you. We have CEE coming up and then also healthy use surveys. So that information we'll still use to see, those are anonymous. So we'll use those to compare to see what types of information, because like you said, that's a good point, but also there's good to that, but also not good that they might falsely say yes in order to avoid that conversation. So those metrics will be in comparison.
Thank you. I appreciate all the care that goes into all this, both the reporting on it, but more so the work that's gone into thinking about what we measure and why and how it impacts students' lives.
Can I just follow up on Marnie brought up a great point. It's always awesome to know whether or not what all the work we're doing gets to students. Have you noticed a different ELA curriculum?
With Membean, yes. Every week, 45 minutes. Membean, everyone knows it, everyone uses it. And that's something that we didn't really do as much in the past. And now we know that we're doing it. So I think that's the biggest part of the ELA curriculum that we all see. Other than that, like we have new books that we're reading. I know this year I had English in the fall, so we read 3 new books that I think were new as part of the curriculum, and I hadn't seen them before. But I don't think students like explicitly know it's new curriculum. They just know it's different from last year.
Yeah, I've only ever existed in the high school with the new curriculum, and Membean is kind of like it's a statement, I guess. It's like everyone knows what Membean is. It's like a joke among the school. Do your 45 minutes of Membean. What was I gonna say? You can definitely tell that the curriculum's like, it's there, going from like English last year to this year. It's like the books kind of share similar themes, I guess, and like similar messages. Not similar, but they connect to each other. So I think it's definitely kind of well known. I'm excited to see how that impacts student outcomes coming from 7th all the way through to like now.
Okay, thank you very much. That will conclude our annual data summit for this year. Thank you very much. Looking forward to seeing more details this spring. I know that it's a big lift, and thank you for it. We'll move on to our next item, which is a discussion point on the student board member and how the previously ASB or currently ASB elected position is elected going forward. I'm going to actually turn it over to our student reps to lead this part.
So how I've kind of talked to people about and how a lot of people would really appreciate if the election that's coming up in the next few months was ran, was if we had it open to all 8th grade through 11th graders to run for the position on a 2-year term. But if an 11th grader really wants the position, it is possible to do it for a year, how we had it last year as well. And then have voting be open to 6th through 12th grade, because as a 6th grader, you should be able to elect the person that's representing you on the school board. And then as part of that, I think would be very beneficial for Carter and I to make an informational video so that everyone knows what they're voting for. And it's not just another ASB position, it's a position that's on the school board doing more. So it's not really a popularity contest and people vote for it with intent instead of just who they think is the popular one. Yeah, so we'd like to have a packet kind of similar to the packet we had last year, but just to do some base information. And then students would create a video and it would be presented in homerooms and advisories to students, and then they could vote. So it would be an election and the video would hold a majority of the weight. So it would be a vote from the students to elect the position, which I think is very important. And how we have the dynamic set up with one elected and one appointed, I think holds a very valuable relationship on the school board and a relationship from the student reps to the students so that they know they have some sort of say in who's representing them.
Yeah, I definitely like the system of having one appointed and one school board. It kind of has a check and a balance system, I think, and gives the students ultimately some like decision making. I think it's really important that we have outreach on the importance of the position. Like, I think the election is definitely a great idea, but having uninformed voters is always rough. I think ASB does that really well with the packet. I think another way to stress the importance, because with the appointed position, it was kind of really stressed to me with like the packet and the interview that this was an important thing that I was setting up for, and it was a commitment too. That and I made that commitment, but I think it's really important that we have some sort of like the packet for sure, maybe even some sort of board meet not applicants, people running Q&A kind of thing, just to kind of stress like this is a big position. It's not just another ASB thing. You're
Maybe
going to,
maybe an opportunity for a board member to help out completing the packet
yeah,
also.
something like that.
Yeah.
For sure.
And I would certainly be willing to help out with that however I could. I do want to, as we are looking at these, I also want to take care of our principals for those 2 buildings of the load that it adds to their staff. I know that they do elections otherwise, and a lot of this would be led by the student reps, but I want to be thoughtful about that as we're considering this.
So real quick, I missed, but I met, Mrs. Phillips and I met with Katja and talked about what we can do. And it's kind of 3-pronged, really. It is, we have the ability in our advisories to do a couple different things. And it's, first, we need to promote it. What's going on, the deadlines, the applications, the process, et cetera, but also promote it. So having our school board student representatives talk to our students about what it is important. And then I think it's really, I don't think, consuming of either of us to put it on the actual election during advisory. So again, I think it'll be simple.
Simple unless the students lobby for ranked choice voting.
I also would be willing to help out in whatever capacity is needed of board members. I like the system. I like what I'm hearing. My question is, what would be the components of the election process? It sounds like the packet and then the actual like number of votes received. Is there anything else? And what would be the weights of the various inputs?
I think just filling out a packet similar to the one we had last year in the ASB packet, and then the video, and having like 75% of the weight be put on the video so that students really get a say, and then the packet more just so that there is true interest and it's not just like running for an ASB position, and people like kind of know what they're doing when they're running for the position. And then, yeah.
So by video, you mean like this, every student would watch the video and vote. So that's like the democratic part. And then the packet is sort of
Anybody
the
who
balance.
applies and makes a video is going to be eligible to be elected. And then it's going to be the majority, right?
I'm also understanding that you're suggesting that about 25% of the weight will be somebody reviewing the packet to make sure that the candidate is fully committed and fully qualified. Is that correct?
In my experience with ASB, the packet doesn't hold weight. That's like, it's kind of a secret, but like it doesn't hold weight among when they're actually doing it. The thing is, it makes you really think about what you're doing. It makes you think, wait, what do I stand for when I'm doing this? What do I believe in? Why am I doing this? And that kind of, I don't know, to me, it was like a mind exercise almost. It was fun filling out the packet. I enjoyed it. Same with the interview. The interview was fun. I enjoyed that too.
A
But I don't know,
clarif-
maybe I'm different.
A clarifying process to let you know why
Like,
you're doing this.
For
Yeah.
ASB, WASBO has guidelines for your scoring rubric for your answers to your packet. So you might utilize that or the template that you have for ASB to create that rubric for scoring, so that it is clear what the scoring is.
I'm sorry. I'm unclear on if I want to run for this position, what you've described to me is I've got to fill out a packet, I've got to make a video, and then I got to get people to vote for me. There's no screening that says you can't run, is there? Other than you're not a rising 8th or to 11th grader. So there's no weight. It doesn't change anything. That's what I'm hearing. I don't know if we're all clear on the same thing.
Yeah, I have a related question, which is there any kind of, like you think about how our two-party democracy system, they have the conventions where the party selects their candidate and sends them to the general election. Is there any kind of step through which some portion of the student body can discern from among the packets from applicants which students will be in the general election? And the reason I ask that particular question is I wonder about a scenario where there are several dozen applicants and suddenly the full student body is being expected to watch quite a lot of video content.
I don't anticipate that.
never run on this one.
I think that would be a best case scenario, quite honestly, because it would show a lot of interest in the position. It would be a great problem to have, exactly. I would actually be quite comfortable saying as a board that we would like to see the student body 612 elect this position and allow our student reps and the principals to determine exactly how that works. I don't think we need to micromanage that process, but I'm
Yeah.
also comfortable.
I'm fine with that. I was mostly asking out of curiosity. It sounds like there was some confusion, but this is a democratic process amongst 6th through 12th graders. And yeah, the details don't need to be a board matter.
I would agree, though I'm sort of disappointed to hear that nobody thinks we're going to have several dozen applicants.
I always appreciate your enthusiasm for the democratic process, Marnie.
I know of a few. So, and that's just like general interest. So once we start promoting it, hopefully we can get there one day. Hopefully soon, very soon.
I think that might be a problem we have in a couple of years. Yeah.
To be fair, Carter ran with quite a few people.
There were 5 people who interviewed last time. Yeah.
I look forward to the day when the short videos constitute a whole movie day
Yeah.
where all the students are just watching the movies.
Okay.
And then lastly, more probably on the board work, which is so we don't have to reinvent the wheel in 2 years. How does this process get recorded as procedure probably, so that it's becomes part of a standard process?
Yeah, I would just say that once the decision has been created between the administrators and the student representatives, it should go into the procedure for this. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just one is an ASB.
One is an appointed and the other, yeah.
Yeah, appointed and the other.
Yeah, so we can get details in there as necessary. I just wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page in making that a broader election than last time. And then we can move on to our last point on the
Thank you,
agenda.
by the way.
Thank you both for.
Yeah, thanks for putting in the work to figure out the process.
Which is what this board and by extension, the community wants to see in a superintendent search process. We are starting this early, and that's intentional because I think it's really valuable for us to know what we want out of the search so that we can get the best possible search to find the best possible candidates to make the best possible hire. So my thinking is just a brainstorm at this point, and I've written down some of my ideas, but I'm quite interested. I'm more interested in hearing what other people have thought of since we talked about having this discussion. Just what do we want from a search company? And that goes particularly for the people who are going to be working with that position very closely. Yeah. Or those people with extensive knowledge of what that position entails and have been through this search process before. Sorry.
Brooke, point of clarification.
Yes.
Is this conversation also going to include potentially considering other options to our timeline or?
Sure.
Okay, because I think that would also influence what I would want to see in a search committee.
Yeah.
So I think as we have Dan Pullman's retirement pending and coming soon, and we are seeing kind of some challenges in the applicant pools around that. I'm wondering if it wouldn't behoove us as a board to consider having a deputy superintendent position put in place so that we could have somebody in the, have somebody ready to go that Joe can then train for a year. And I think that if we wanted to move in that direction, that would shift and change what we would be looking for in a search. I think it would shift and change what kind of an applicant we might be looking for. And so that's my thoughts about it. I think that when we look at the east side of the state, a lot of them do deputy superintendents for those reasons, because it's hard to get people to kind of notice some of those smaller districts. To be able to move here is also part of our challenge. And so it could give somebody time to be able to get to the island, find a location on the island. And I think that it would also be a good idea, given that we're losing two major pieces of institutional knowledge in our district, to give some time and space for that knowledge to be passed on.
I love the idea of overlap. I really do, of bringing someone on to learn. I would be concerned about a full year overlap because I think that puts us from ahead of the 8 ball to behind the 8 ball in finding someone for the position, but I do see the benefit of it. And so I think it's absolutely something we should talk about.
Challenge with doing less than a year is that administrators run July to July. And so if you didn't do a full year of overlap, you would be asking somebody to break a contract, which would not attract the kind of candidate that you would want.
Yeah, no, yeah.
I would love to hear from our administrators about what the distribution of duties would be in that scenario, because I see the story playing out where we have the understudy for the superintendent role well covered, but some other essential roles potentially under energized. So I'd love to hear how that would play out.
Thanks, Marnie. Thanks for that opportunity. Dan and I have done a lot of talking, and he keeps trying to leave, and I keep pulling him back in. So we're reconfiguring our thinking, not changing timelines, but reconfiguring our thinking. So we are reworking the current job description for, we had originally posted for an executive director of finance and operations, and we didn't find a suitable applicant in the pool. Not that there weren't good people, but there's no school experience there. And so with the salary level we were asking for, with no school experience, it's unreasonable to pay that level without a school experience. So we're revising the job description to Director of Finance, reducing that salary. And Dan will stay and train. Hopefully we get somebody in here soon enough so that he can follow through on his own plans to leave June 30. But I know for a fact he'll help me out if we need a little more time. So if we can get that in place, we also have a director, or our athletic director is retiring. And so we're going to reconfigure some of our administrative duties so that we can fill in for all the other things that Dan does that are not just the finance piece. Yet to be determined. There may be a variety of ways that we do that. It may be a position that's inclusive of some oversight. It may be that we stipend some pieces, and maybe there's some certificated staff who would pick that up. There may be principals that have an interest. So we're still in the process of reconfiguring that piece. And again, neither one of us want to leave the district without leadership. So we're both somewhat flexible. I think that Dan is more the unicorn position, and we need to really figure that out. And the superintendent position is also a challenge. We just have to be cognizant of the fact that we live on an island, that it's hard to expect somebody to pick up their life and come here, but it is a really nice little district. And so people have been hearing a lot from me about coming here. You know, there's been a lot of conversation with various individuals in other places who may want to apply. But the point I'm trying to make to you is I appreciate the sentiment, and I thought the same. I mean, I sent the board a posting, I believe it's Kennewick, that is the current district superintendent's retiring next June, like I am, and they're looking for a deputy with the intention that it's the heir apparent, right? I think we have to focus on filling the finance position. So I think your conversation on the superintendent search is rightly placed, and continue to have that. I don't think we're at a point yet where we can say, let's get a deputy soup, because you're kind of putting the cart before the horse on that one. You're right, in the sense of we've got to fill this one first and figure out what we're doing. I'm still here for another year. So anyway, just
I just want to compliment you, Dan, on your poker face, because you didn't let your excitement show at all when she said you might be willing to stay a little longer.
I would also offer that we can have this same conversation about how we approach search firms, et cetera, and leave the option to say, oh, we're approaching a search firm to find a deputy or to find a soup. So we could kind of keep the door open based on how the other pieces you mentioned fall into play, how and when and who.
And I don't think you're going to be in this situation when you recruit for a superintendent. But like Dan, I mean, he's willing to stay and make sure that we have a good transition. I would do that as well. I just think his position's much more, they're both important, right? You need the continuity. It's harder to find that unicorn than this unicorn.
So when we talk about the qualities we're looking for in a search firm, I would say we're we're pretty decided that we will use a search firm, that the advantages of using a search firm far outweigh the cost. Are we talking at the high level of like values and recognition of our mission and vision, that kind of level? Or are we talking like we want them to start at such and such date and use this and that process?
So here's what I thought of. Here's the list I came up with of, personally for me, what I think is important in a search firm. What I would look for is a track record of placing superintendents for 4 or more years in a district. So someone to show that they find good matches, someone who wants to stay and continue in that district. Having a diverse initial pool of applicants and a diverse pool of top applicants. Experience in community involvement in the process. History of values-aligned hires, which is demonstrated by the 4+ years, but also important to note on its own. Experience at student involvement in the process. Experience at staff involvement in the process. The cost, which includes are there placement guarantees to their service? If they can't find someone in the first search, often these companies will guarantee that they'll do the next one at their costs or for free. Track record of candidate approval and or positive reviews if that's available. How do candidates like working with this search firm? How they go about getting, what their vetting process is, how they go from the full pool to the top pool, and how much involvement we want the district or board to have in narrowing down from that full pool to the top pool. So that was sort of where I was looking at is, what do we want the firm to be doing for us rather than the details of how they're going to do it?
Right. I love that list. Thank you. I also would maybe add experience working with districts of roughly our size in terms of enrollment or budget.
I think I would add, because there's a difference between the placement and then there's the impact. And so just because somebody stays in a job for 4 or more years doesn't mean that the impact of them in that situation was positive. So I would want to look at, they placed the superintendent into a district, they stayed more than 4 years, and what happened? So how do staff feel about that superintendent? How does the community feel? What do their financials look like? What do their student academic scores look like? Like show me what that superintendent's impact on the district has been. And is that still in alignment with the values that the board was looking for?
So you're basically saying you want references. You want to know
Yes.
who they worked with and be able to speak with those districts. I would add one that you want to make sure that they maintain confidentiality for the candidates until the last possible moment. Again, in my experience, people don't apply for a job just to apply for a job. When you apply to be a superintendent, you're applying because you're willing to say yes. And if for some reason they're not the one picked, they still have a district to go back to. So maintaining confidentiality is critical.
I think I would also want to see, along with the diversity of candidates in the initial pool, diversity of candidates in the final pool, what is the firm's overall diversity in the placements that they have made. And I think beyond just, race and gender, I would also want to look at where are applicants coming from? Are they all from one region in Washington State? Are they all from one academic school? Like how truly wide is that net?
I love all these criteria, and I would add, I don't know if this is necessarily a criteria, but I would be willing to work with a firm that meets all these criteria, despite the fact that they may not have a lot of local knowledge, like if they're headquartered elsewhere in the country. I would want to at least weigh that against a local firm that knows our state and knows the folks who might not have as far to move if they would move to the island. But there's also something to be said for a firm that may be able to pull from a candidate pool that is just elsewhere in the country and willing to relocate.
And I would add to that that I would hope that the firm would also represent their own levels of diversity. And so I would want the firm's values to be in alignment with our values and for their consultants to reflect those values.
Anything from our administrators or students or community members?
Yeah, been through this before. I think a crucial part of this, and you kind of touched on it, but are the consultants aligned with the district? Do their values match us? Because I can think of several firms that have people that work for them that I wouldn't want those people. They're great firms. They do good work. They place a lot of people. But if we got one of those consultants, it wouldn't be a good process for South Woodby. So I think it's really important that we know who those consultants are and how do they align. Who is the proposed person or persons that they would align with South Woodby to do that process?
Yes, that's like when you're looking for your owner rep, you want to know exactly who it is that's going to be on site. It's the same for that. Some of those firms, I'm thinking of one in particular, there are consultants that work for them that would be great and consultants that work for them that wouldn't be helpful to you. So being able to know exactly who it is that they're going to assign to you.
Yeah. I think I would just comment on your suggestion, Joe. I had previous experience in Seattle where the consultants didn't have the local knowledge and the candidates they were bringing really weren't a good fit. So I would, I would want them to really understand this community and know what to look for and who would be a good fit for this community. Besides all the other things you guys suggested.
I think that's a really good point in that whether they have the knowledge or are willing to gain the knowledge, they need to have they need to end up with the knowledge before they make the applicant pool suggestions. Yeah.
And be reminded, they're only working with you for several months. You don't have to like them. You have to get the right candidate for your district. So that's another piece of it. All of that stuff that you're putting in there, I don't think you're going to get all of it. But if you're going to get a good candidate pool and a willing consultant that will work with you, and I think, not to go too far afield, the most important to me is that you find a superintendent who you can work with, who shares the values that you have for your school district. Because the last thing you want to do is put somebody in a seat. They don't want to fail either, and you don't want to fail. So you don't want a mismatch. It's way too important to mess it up.
I wonder about whether there's an opportunity to interview superintendents who have been placed in roles by the firm in order to understand what their experience as a candidate was. Because I have had an experience as a candidate of working with a executive search firm that treated me with a lot of dignity and got to know me as a whole person and made really compelling matches with me for job openings. And I've had the other experience of being looked at by a computer as a resume and being match made with really ridiculous opportunities that were nowhere near what I was up for. So I would just say hearing from a candidate about the quality of their experience would tell us a lot about, would tick a lot of those boxes.
And Joe, I absolutely agree with you, right? The end goal is that we have a solid match for the district, right? Absolutely agree with that. I also think that this is an opportunity for us to speak with our dollars about what we are willing to accept and what we are willing to not accept. And I think that especially around superintendent search firms, there is perhaps a need to have some clear conversations about what they could do to change and adjust in how they conduct searches in the state. And I think that no, we're not going to get everything on our list, right? We never get everything on our list. But I do think that asking these questions and having them have to respond to them is power in that. And that we are watching it. And yeah, we're a little South Whidbey. We're, but we also carry a lot of weight, I think, in the state. And I think it would be a good message to send that we're going to ask those questions.
On that note, every time we go to one of these WASDA conferences, I get more and more feedback about how people are noticing South Whidbey, noticing the strength and voice of our student leadership, noticing the integrity of our efforts, noticing the power of our community. And so I think there is something to be said for designing a search firm selection process that has all of our values wrapped into it, even if the candidates that come forward, we may have to choose from among what is on offer, even if they don't check every box. But I think the power in exposing them to the list of boxes will have repercussions. I really appreciate that perspective.
Question, a process question, talking about all these different criteria. I assume we would do some sort of matrix where you or we would go through a process of combining similar criteria that we've been brainstorming and weighting them, and then we can start filling in search firms and figuring out how they rank.
I've never done this before, so I'm working out that process. That's why I wanted to start it early.
I like Joe's idea.
Yeah.
Well,
I do.
I stole
No,
it from Mr.
absolutely.
Pullman with the owner rep
Yeah,
search
Yep.
process.
No.
It sounds exactly like an RFP. That sounds fantastic.
that's exactly how I assumed it would work. But yeah, I think that's how we should do it too.
And I think Dan should do that. I'm just kidding.
I want to know what the principals are hoping for, because it's going to be your boss.
Yeah.
John's done this before. I'm just here to watch the show and learn. And once I get more insight, but I want to hear from what John's looking for more in the search. I'm very new to the whole process of it. So I don't know what I don't know yet.
So are we.
So first, I think we recruited New York. I think for me, and I'm not speaking for the other principals, but I think we have great momentum right now in our district. I think we have a very cohesive school board. I think things are happening. And so I would like to see somebody that can come in and just keep that momentum. It's an opportunity to make changes. Obviously, it'll be a person with different talents. But still, I think to keep us trending up, that's my biggest thing. Keep the momentum.
Maybe to translate into a search firm criteria, I would suggest like a firm that's good at marketing us as a district to increase the number of applicants who would be interested.
And when I think about the size of our district, and the role that Joe plays, she can go really micro and really macro, and somebody who can do that with us and really understand some really detailed things, but also zoom out. So I think understanding the scale to our size and how our systems function is going to be pretty crucial.
So I think one thing we would add in the reference checks would be retention of previous administrators. How much turnover was there?
That's a good idea. The other thing I would add, and I think you've already addressed it, but that the search firm really understands the need for culture, to look at that as a high priority for us, somebody who understands, or at least we have the sense, can come to understand our culture quickly.
Well, and I think that also speaks to how does that firm incorporate or is inclusive of community members, parents, current staff, all participants.
Christy, what about you?
I think the big thing is someone who's going to know all the jobs she does. There's so many. And I think any superintendent might not see the multifaceted job of the superintendent of South Whidbey.
Ability to craft a job description
Well-
that's going to get the
Can I-
candidates we need.
I think there's something to that also in experience in hiring for a district of our enrollment and budget.
Again,
And rural spread.
Yep.
So the thing I really want to emphasize here is that we're looking at the search rather than the superintendent at the moment, what we want out of the search. Just to, because we will have time to talk ad nauseum about what we want out of the superintendent with the search firm that we hire. So now it's about what we want out of the search firm.
Yeah, I think it's helpful to hear, some of these qualities that are, about the person who finally gets their seat into that chair, because it does help, especially with Translator Greenhair and at my side. It helps us identify the questions we have to ask the search firm so that we know that they're experienced in making the right kind of match.
the search firm 14 years ago, or it will be 14 years, it happened to be McPherson and Jacobson. I was one of 5 people that were interviewed. One was had been working in Saudi Arabia, was a person of color, was female. One was from Tukwila, had no superintendent experience. One was a gentleman retiring from the state of California, I think. Then there was me, and I don't remember the 5th one, John May. He and Dan are the only ones who were here. And they narrowed that. That was a board interview in a fishbowl. So anybody who wanted to show up could show up. And that was, of course, after they did all the legwork. And then they narrowed it to 3, and the 3 of us each spent a full day in the district. It was exhausting. Basically, you start in the morning and you meet with students and you meet with staff and you meet with each building, and I met with principals. And then that night, which was quite unfair, by the time I was exhausted after a whole day, that's when I presented to the community. And if there was a hire based on that presentation, it wouldn't have been me. But that's a typical day in the life, because that's what happens, right? It's 9 o'clock at night, been here since first thing this morning, you work all day, and then you still have to be on. They did a nice job. They kept everything confidential. I was impressed with them as a search firm. As a superintendent looking for a position, I looked at different search firms and said, who do I feel like can represent me? So there's that side of it too. I think all of the things you put down on paper are what you want from a search firm, and which things are the priority. And then when do you want to cut bait? Because that's important for me to know, so that we can keep a timeline for that. And then you have to decide, probably with that search firm, who do you want involved in your search? How are you going to do this? Do you want the current superintendent? Do you not want the current superintendent? How do you want your administrators involved? All of that comes from the search firm. So again, I really never thought until this moment that not one of you has done this before.
Is that a hint of terror I detect?
So I'm happy to help in any way that I can to because I have done it before, right, on the receiving end. And I also got to do it. I was a board member across the country. I was a board member and superintendent, totally different district. Anyway, but in that district, there was a search. So I have some experience. I also have experience with knowing all of the people that are in these search firms, because most of them are retired superintendents. Anyway, so I think you have resources. And you're also going to see it in action right next door, because I'm not sure what Coupeville's doing or when, but they're going to be looking for a superintendent. So
I know when their interviews are going to be, right after spring break.
okay, so you can
We got a 5-week posting going up very shortly.
And so you can glean from that kind of the same process. That's a pretty quick timeline.
Yeah.
Yours is much longer, luckily, so you can take a little bit more time on each of the steps.
And as a community member of the Whidbey Island, I may attend a few of those public
There you go.
sessions.
The other thing that you want to backwards map when you want to try and have somebody in this, right? So typically the optimal window is actually, it's coming to an end, isn't it? For the optimal window. So you probably want to post before the winter break in December. Be looking at applications early January, try to get somebody here, named by March so that you have crossover time. So if you backwards map from that, you probably want to get a search firm lined up by summer,
Yes.
right? So then you can do the community meetings about what do you want in this person, and then you can get a posting drawn up with all of those values by November so that it's out there and you're getting applicants by early January.
And backing further from there, if we want to have a search firm hired by summer, that implies we want to, be interviewing prior to that so we can
Yep.
make the decision. So that pretty much backs us up to now.
Yeah.
Meaning we should just keep our foot on the gas on this.
So my suggestion there is that I send this list that we just created to this, at least student reps through superintendent, and have you all prioritize these things. And then I can build, maybe with a quick meeting with Dan, since he did the owner rep, build a matrix from that and then present that at the next meeting. So this would be a request to prioritize within a week.
Pardon me, I'm assuming that kind of asynchronous work is really just going to be delivering straight to you, not
Yes.
working any kind of
Correct.
collaborative process.
Correct.
Great,
That would be
thanks.
sending your prioritization to me.
Great,
And then I
thank
will
you.
synthesize them, just as we do with evaluation, so we are not discussing or debating anything except for in public.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other thoughts, comments, questions on the soup search process? Okay.
Is there something that you want me to do in terms of search firms? Do you want a list? Do you want?
Well, we've gotten some, but I'd love to cross-reference those we've received, those you know.
So I'm
and build a-
heading off to the National Superintendent's Conference tomorrow. So they're always there. So I can make sure that I get materials and get them back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would also just say I welcome any and all advice that you wish to offer within the availability of your time and energy, because I think it's invaluable. And you're our most expert in-house person on this subject on every front. So I would say keep the input coming to the extent that you're willing.
I would also extend that to particularly Mr. Patton and Mr. Poolman, who have been through that process here in the district. That if you have any input, whether you filter it through Dr. Moshe or want to present it directly, please. Okay. That's all we have then. Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned. Good night.